Morning, this is Brian. Today is Tuesday, November 14th, 2023, and I'm here parked along California Highway 78 here near the town of Banner, just underneath the Vulcan Mountains, and it's time for a spotlight on trees and shrubs. Why? Because this plant can sometimes become a small tree size, most often a shrub. And our focus for today is Catclaw Acacia. And it's this here. This is Senegalia greggii. Catclaw Acacia is I believe it's partially to mostly or maybe even fully winter deciduous shrub in the Pea family, the Fabaceae. And it's in the mimosa section, the Mimosoideae section of the Pea family. And I'll explain a little bit more about the mimosa family, subfamily, during the course of this video. So what we have here is a medium to very large shrub, and it's typically deciduous, anywhere from semi, I believe, to fully deciduous, and I believe it's mostly winter deciduous, but I haven't had a lot of experience with this plant before. So I'll put a little more information on the screen when I edit the video. But what we have here is a very beautiful but somewhat dangerous plant. This is the type of plant that a lot of desert travelers get stuck in. So another name for this plant is wait a minute bush, because A, Catclaw Acacia, and B, wait a minute bush, refer to the thorny outgrowths on the twigs. And I will show you those momentarily when I get to them without scraping myself on them. And sometimes you have to really look to see them, but you'll feel them. So on these twigs, I'm trying to see if I can show them off. They're kind of hard to show on camera. But yeah, right here, that's where the name Catclaw comes from, because that looks like a cat's claw, and they're very sharp. So that's where the name Catclaw Acacia comes from. And it used to be in the genus Acacia. It used to be known as Acacia greggii, and some people still refer to it as such. But a lot of our acacias here in the southwestern United States have been moved into the genus Senegalia. Maybe there's some DNA differences between them and acacias, which are normally found mostly in places like Australia and Africa. So there must be something in the DNA that separates those from our acacias, which are, again, now listed in the genus Senegalia. So the thorns may look small. These spiny outgrowths here might look small and even barely visible on camera, but believe me, you get caught in one of these, you will know, because they are very sharp-tipped. So one of the reasons why this plant's called wait a minute bush is because you don't want to just wrestle your way quickly out of it, because you're going to be more likely to get caught in it and more ripped to shreds as a result. So that's one of the reasons for this common name, wait a minute bush. So what I need to do, I need to go change my batteries really quickly, and then we will start talking about more of the features of this plant. Okay, one common feature of this plant that's not always evident in every Fabaceae or Pea family are the compound leaves, which are bipinnately compound on Senegalia greggii. So, as you see here, it looks like they got really tiny leaves here. And I accidentally took one off. I'm not trying to take the leaves off of these plants. But they are actually twice compound. In other words, divided twice into two sets of leaflets. So, what I have here behind my index finger is an entire leaf that is twice divided. It gets divided once and then a second time. So it's called bipinnately compound. And leaves are small, so really good details are sometimes hard to get. So I'm going to just go to a few spots and see the best detail I can get. Okay, well, as you see here, and I'm being very careful so I don't get myself stuck on the spine, what I have in my hand here is a twig. And all of these branching off from the twigs are full leaves. So you can see there's a rachis here, or a leaflet stalk, and then you can see it's divided a second time into a secondary pair of leaflets. So that's what I mean by bipinnately compound. Bipinnately comes from the Latin term pinnatus, which is feathered. So the arrangements of the leaves are kind of like a feather, but they're divided twice into feather-like segments. So as you see here, the twigs are brownish in color, and again, very well endowed with these thorny outgrowths. So this is not a plant you want to get tangled in. And as I'm walking around looking at the details of the shrub, my shirt is getting caught on some of the twigs. But it's a really attractive bush, really attractive shrub. And it grows in a wide range of habitats. You can find it in desert washes. Desert washes and canyons are a pretty common place to find Senegalia greggii. But then also in disturbed sites like the side of the road, that's another common place where you're going to find Senegalia greggii. So what we have here is a very large shrub, very large statured shrub. And very finely divided into small twigs and side growths. And then of course we got the foliage here, which kind of gives off a bluish gray-green cast. Very common for a lot of arid area plants, like deserts. Because this plant will grow from desert transition. And we're kind of in the desert transition. We're not truly in the full-blown desert yet. You just go a couple more miles down that way, that's all desert over there. And that's the Colorado desert. So this plant is found from desert transition, mostly below 4,000 feet, down into the low desert. And it's going to be a pretty common find, especially along roadsides too. Like I said, disturbed areas are a pretty good place to find this shrub. And of course, canyons and washes, sometimes on slopes, but they definitely like these lower lands so they can get their roots deep in there because there's not much rain here during the year. So let me try to get a few foliage details in the pictures in the next segment, and then we'll talk more about the flowers, which unfortunately are absent on the plant because this is mid-November. But then I can show you what some of the fruit looks like. So here I am next to another specimen here. So I can kind of give you an idea of what the flowers look like. And they are these kind of powder puff flower heads. It looks like this one might have bloomed recently. But they come in these kind of little clusters of whitish, creamish colored flowers, usually in spring and early summer. And then eventually these inflorescences turn into these nascent seed pods. These are the start of the seed pods. So we must have had a late summer, early fall flush of flowers on this specimen here, likely due to the extra rains that we had from Tropical Storm Hillary back in late August. Again, we're in mid-November right now, so we're not really looking for a lot of flowers, but at least I could give you an idea of what the flower heads look like. So again, they're in these small, almost raceme-like clusters that sometimes branch, as you see here. And these are usually puffy, whitish flowers, and they might be fragrant. I'll double check the fact on that. And then they will turn into these twisted seed pods here that are, as you can see here, that are constricted between seeds. So each little bulge is where a seed is. And these are starting to dry out. And they have multiple seeds in them, as you can hear. They kind of rattle. And I believe germinating these is supposed to be pretty difficult. Germinating, a lot of these legume plants have very hard seed coats. And Senegalia greggii is not an exception. So basically the seeds need to be scarified before they're going to be able to germinate. And how that's going to happen is normally where these are growing, a lot of places where they're growing, especially in those canyon washes that periodically flood usually during summer monsoon thunderstorms that suddenly burst out and drench the rain over the mountains, and then the water comes rushing down the canyons. What will happen is the seeds will be carried down in the torrent, and then the seeds will be bumping and scraping against all the river rocks and everything at the bottom of the canyon, effectively nicking the seed coat. And with the recent moisture in the soil, that also gives them a chance to sprout. So scarifying the seeds is the way you're going to be most likely to get these to come up. So a lot of these Fabaceae plants, especially in these arid climates like here, require their seeds to be nicked and scarified before being able to germinate. So I mentioned that these are found from desert transition, the desert side of the mountains, down into the low desert. This is more of a low to mid-elevation desert plant. And what kind of other plants are you going to be likely to see with the Senegalia greggii? Well, let's put it this way. We have these here, which is a honey mesquite, and this is Prosopis glandulosa variety Torreana. This is going to be a very common associate of the Senegalia greggii. So yes, honey mesquite is a very common associate. And you're going to find other plants like Saurothemnus spinosus, the smoke tree, other species of Prosopis, the mesquites. Likely going to find stuff like that. Trying to think of other names of plants. A lot of times you'll find desert lavender, Condea emery, which is not around here. It's more of a lower desert plant. But those are kind of plants, a lot of plants, especially ones you find in canyon washes in the desert. Those are going to be places we're going to expect to see more of it. So, again, this is typically a shrub, but it can approach tree size in optimal conditions. Apparently here's where we have optimal conditions. And it becomes this very beautifully well-crowned tree-sized shrub, again, with really cool gray-green leaves. So I'm going to go over to another one really quickly. I'll catch you on the next clip. Okay, so we're looking at the bark. Now this is a more moderate-sized specimen here. As I mentioned before, the newer twigs kind of have a brownish color with some light striations. And we're going to start migrating down a little bit. Now we're going to start getting more of a grayish color as we move down. And again, watching out, there are still thorns on these as well. So the lower bark tends to be more of a gray color. Now on much older specimens, the bark will be outright furrowed. The bark will be outright furrowed on older specimens. So I'm probably going to return back to that first one, but this plant will form extremely dense thickets. So again, word of caution, do not attempt to go into one of these thickets. I went back to this one over here. I'm going to try to show you the bark of a really, really mature specimen of Senegalia greggii, because the bark on this is actually quite beautiful. So once we get much older, and of course I'm trying to be very careful, we get this kind of flaky, kind of striped, furrowy bark that gets even more deeply furrowed as you go further in the thicket, which I most certainly am not going to do, because I am not trying to get myself scraped up on this beautiful but deadly force of nature here. But you can see here, the bark becomes much more furrowed as you go along. So again, brownish gray, larger twigs, more grayish, lighter gray, and then more furrowing. So this is quite a cool plant. I believe this is supposed to be a pretty good honey plant as well. The honey of this plant, I think, is supposed to be pretty important. I'm pretty sure the bees go bonkers over this plant. So this would, if you're able to plant it in an area where you don't have to walk in your garden, this would probably make a really good bee plant for your yard. But again, you're going to want to keep this out of the way of where you're going to need to walk. So be very careful. Now this plant, I'm going to put more of the formal range of this plant here on the screen, but it could be pretty widespread here, especially in Southern California, and I believe down into Baja. I'm not sure where else. I'm pretty sure this is more widespread in the United States, but you know where to look. The desert side of the mountains and the lower elevations, you can find this really cool plant that's probably best to admire from a little bit of a distance. So I'm going to go ahead, just take maybe another picture or two. Now the sun's out and the visibility is a little better. And then we'll basically say my farewell and end the video pretty soon. So, if you're out there, out in a desert canyon, poking around, hiking, keep an eye out for this guy. Senegalia greggii, the Catclaw Acacia. Now, keep an eye on it, out for it, not just to not get caught, just to avoid getting caught in it, but also take some time to appreciate how cool our native plants are here in California, because this is one beautiful shrub, and I would love to get these in bloom. So maybe in the springtime, maybe I'll come back down this way and do a spotlight follow-up, because I occasionally do spotlight follow-ups and ode videos to plants I've already spotlighted. So I definitely would love to come down here in late spring and get these in bloom. This is a magnificent specimen. This is a pretty large one. But yes, Senegalia greggii, Catclaw Acacia. Wait a minute bush. Not only should you wait a minute if you get caught in it, but also wait a minute and just soak in the beauty that this plant exhibits. That's going to do it for my spotlight video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next episode.